Hey guys, it's a teenage atheist, and today I'm doing a video on Pascal's wager and what is all that is wrong with the argument, because I know that a lot of Christians like using the argument for a reason why you should believe in their God. So basically the argument states that you should believe in God even if there's a strong chance that he might not be real, because the penalty for not believing, which is going to hell, is so undesirable that it's better to take the safe way out. So to summarize, if God doesn't exist, then either two things happen. Either you weren't believing in God and nothing happens because he doesn't exist, or that you were believing in God but nothing happens because he doesn't exist. So either way, if he doesn't exist, it's not that big a deal. But if he does exist and you believe in him, then you make it into heaven, and that's a good thing. But if he does happen to exist and you think that he doesn't, then you go to hell, which is the bad thing. Which means, basically, whether or not he exists doesn't matter, because if you believe in him, either nothing happens, which, oh well, or he does exist and you get to go to heaven, which is a good thing, rather than going to hell. So it's safer to believe in him and play the safe way. There are a number of things wrong with this type of thinking. One of them is that what happens if God punishes people who blindly obey and rewards people by allowing them into heaven if they're skeptic and decide that they're not going to believe in him? Because as far as we know, God might actually be like that. So now, if you have a God which allows people who are skeptics and are atheists into heaven, and he puts all the religious people into hell because they blindly obeyed him and did not think for themselves, then if you believe in God and the regular Christian God does exist, you go to heaven. But if the atheistic God, I guess you could say, exists, then you go to hell. So now you can go to both, which means that you have to be able to make an actual decision on whether or not God exists. Otherwise, you could be choosing that this God exists and you end up going to hell because you were blindly following it. Another problem with Pascal's wager is that it doesn't state what God to believe in, which means that you don't just have, if you believe in God, you go to heaven, if you don't, you go to hell, or if you believe in him or don't believe in him, nothing happens. Just those four outcomes. You have a whole list of gods, and you have to be able to say that, okay, if I believe in this God, then I'm going to heaven, but what happens to all the rest of the gods? I mean, the chances of you being right just by saying this God is the one I'm going to choose are pretty slim. Which means that unless you choose the right God, then you could be going to hell because you're believing in the wrong God. Another false premise that people have is that if you believe in God and you end up to be wrong about it, then you don't lose anything because you were believing in him and he didn't exist. Oh well, at least you didn't go to hell because you didn't believe in him and he did happen to exist. But what people don't realize is that there is a cost for believing in a God and going with religion. It's not just a free ride you get. You either get into heaven or you don't, because there wasn't a God to begin with anyways. A lot of religions don't allow you to eat meat at certain times or at any times at all, such as pork, or during Lent with Catholics, on every Friday you don't get to eat any meat besides fish because that's apparently not meat. So you lose foods that you could possibly eat, and it also eliminates foods on certain times that you might possibly eat. Another thing that religion costs you is your foreskin. It costs you your time and energy because you have to take the time to go to church. It's supposed to cost you 10% of your income, although I do know that many people don't actually follow this rule. And I like to point out that it says directly in the Bible that if you do not give 10% of your income towards the church and towards God, then God is not going to be very happy with you. It also costs valuable scientific and medical advancements, because if everybody just jumped on the train and said, well, we'll believe in God because it's a safe route to do it, then we aren't going to advance any farther in science and medical science, and our technology isn't going to get any better. It's also going to cost you life-saving blood transfusions, because I know There are some religions which say that you can't have a blood transfusion, or you can't have an injection, or they deny some part of your medical help that you may need, and that can cost you your life over that. It also takes away quite a few of your basic rights, freedoms, and dignity. I know for one that religion has pretty muchly destroyed sex in our culture today. It's shunned, it's considered bad. You should only be doing it when the church tells you to do it. And even people like atheists like me, it's really hard to escape that, because that's something that's been ingrained in our culture so much. It's going to be extremely tough and almost impossible to get rid of that now. Also, Pascal's wager appeals to fear of hell, which is something that I don't think very many atheists actually are afraid of. And if they are, they're new atheists who just got out of Christianity and they're still worried about that kind of stuff. Because every atheist that I've talked to is not really that afraid of hell. And when a Christian comes up and brings up the Pascal wager and says, why don't you believe? I mean, here's a good example, and gives you this argument, it doesn't really do anything, because we've already pretty muchly said that there is no hell by saying that there is no God, which is pretty much a blind threat to the majority of atheists. To believers that may be questioning things, it's another story. But you also have to think about, why would a good and all-loving God create hell for his own people who he created? And I've had a lot of people say that, well, God has a plan for you. So does that mean that God has a plan for me being an atheist and he plans to throw me in hell? That doesn't sound like a very good God, and he sounds pretty flawed, because if he had a plan for everybody, why doesn't everybody believe in him? Thanks for watching on The Teenage Atheist. If you liked this video, then leave a like down below, and if you want more videos, then subscribe above.